All right, let's get started with this app, shall we? Open up Xcode, create a new project, and we're going to be working with a single view app. I'm going to say next, and let's go ahead and call this Artable. You can call it whatever you want. If you want to make an app for selling games or, I don't know, homemade furniture, whatever it is that you think you might like to sell, you can create a name based on that. All right, so mine's going to be called Artable because this is an app for selling photography prints and other arts stuff. I mainly chose this because it was easy to get nice, pretty, free pictures from websites like Unsplash and Pexels. So that's kind of why I went with this theme. All right, so go ahead and do that. We don't need core data or anything else. I'm going to say next. I'm just going to put this right here on the desktop and going to full screen this. And the next thing that we need to do is remember we are going to be creating two apps, one for the consumer and one for the owner, an admin app. So you may think, well, great, I'm going to need two Xcode projects, which you could do, but what happens when you have source code you could share between those projects? You're going to end up constantly going back and forth, copying and pasting code between the two projects and hoping you aren't forgetting anything, and you usually do, and this just causes a headache. The better way is to have the two apps under one project. This is done by having two what is called targets, okay? So here we see our main project. And then here we have targets. Okay, so this is the actual app. This is our project. And we can have multiple targets inside of our project. And so what we do here is we just click on the plus button down here, add a target, and scroll down to what we want to add, which is another single view app. Select that, say next, same thing. Only this is going to be our admin app. So I'm going to say Artable admin, okay? And then say finish. All right, and now you'll see here we have two targets, Artable and Artable admin, each with their own bundle identifier. And over here on the left, we see two folders, Artable, which has what we expect, an app delegate, view controller, main storyboard, assets, etc. And then we also have Artable admin, which has all of that same stuff too for its app. And the cool thing is that when we have code that can be shared, it's as simple as specifying in the file that it applies to both projects. For instance, we're going to be using the same assets for both of these projects. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the assets folder for the Artable admin, say move to trash. And then I'm going to create a new folder here, or a new group called shared, okay? And this shared group is going to contain all the files that is going to apply to both Artable and the Artable admin apps. So I'm going to grab the assets from here, drag them up into the shared, and then the way to make it so that when we compile the apps that we know which ones to grab, which files apply to which target, is you can select it right here. And this same thing goes for regular files as well. You select it, go to the file inspector right here, and then under target membership, you check the applicable targets that this file, or in this case, this assets, apply to. And we want this to apply to both Artable and Artable admin. So I check both of those. Now under the Artable, you'll see that for instance, this viewcontroller.swift file, it has a target membership of only Artable, and this viewcontroller under Artable admin has a target membership of just the admin app, as expected. All right, so that is how we're going to be working with two apps under the same project, making it easy to share code between those two apps. All right, now the next thing that I'm going to do is set up a GitHub repo. At the time of recording, I have not yet finished the Git section, And it is not critical that you follow along with me here. You can complete this entire section without doing any version control or having a GitHub repository. I'm doing this just to show how it works, as well as make it so I can have milestone source code to upload for you to compare code with, all right? So don't freak out if you don't know how to do Git and version control and don't have a GitHub repo. That's totally fine. You can just watch as I go through this and kind of learn a little bit here, all right? So I'm gonna go ahead and open up Safari and bring over my GitHub repo here. And we're going to go to right here at the top, we're gonna create a new repository. And I'm gonna go ahead and call this Artable. And we're going to give it a description. This is the e-commerce app for the iOS 12 master class. And then I'm going to make this private for now. If you don't have a paid GitHub account, then you can only do public, but I have a paid one, so I'm going to make this private for now. And then we can initialize this repository with a README, a .gitignore, and a license optionally. It says here that skip this step if you're importing an existing repository. We have an existing repository, which is our Xcode project that we just created. I am going to initialize this with a README, and I'll show you how to handle that in just a second. And then I'm also going to add a .gitignore file, and I'll just do a quick search for Swift here. You have a number of template .gitignore files, and what a gitignore file is sometimes you have files in your project that you don't want to upload to Git, okay, to your GitHub account. Those might be privacy sensitive things like API keys or things like that that you don't want other people to get access to. Other times it's things like CocoaPods. You might have a large number of CocoaPods, and you don't want all of those hundreds, possibly thousands of files being uploaded as well. So we are going to add a gitignore using the Swift template, and we're not going to add a license. And I'm going to say create repository. All right, so here we have our brand new repository. All it has is a gitignore and a README. Now our next task is to link our local repository on our computer with this online repository. And that's pretty easy. Just gonna open up Terminal and bring it over here. Gonna cd into our project folder, our Xcode project. And I'm gonna say git status to see our status. We have lots of changes that we need to add and commit. So I'm gonna say git add dot git commit dash m, and I'm gonna call this initial commit. And if I say git branch, we should be on the master branch. That's good. And now I'm going to link our local repository with our online repository. And we do that by saying git remote. Okay, so we're saying that we are going to be adding a remote, git remote add, and we're going to name the remote origin. And then we need to get the URL right here from our project. You can see here, git@github.com, jburgoyne, yada, yada. So we can just copy that right there by clicking that, and then going back into terminal and pasting that. All right, so now our local and online are linked. And if we do git remote -v, you'll see here that, that we are linked up with fetching and pushing to this repository here. Now the next step is to get our local files and project up onto our online repo. All right, so what you do, if you were just following along with a guide perhaps, you would say something like git push -u origin master. Okay, so we're pushing our local master branch code into our online master branch code. And if I press enter, enter my password, and then we'll be getting an error here, okay? So it says that updates were rejected because the remote contains work that you do not have. Okay, so it's saying that our remote has these two files, the gitignore and the readme, and it's saying that we should pull that. So, all right, so I'll go ahead and pull that, git pull origin master, but it's not going to work again. Let me put in my password. It's not going to work again because it says, let's see here. Refusing to merge unrelated histories, all right? So these do not have any history, any common history, and so we can't just go and merge, okay? But because I know that this is the very first commit and that we don't have any extra history or baggage that that we need to worry about, I'm okay with kind of forcing this. And the way to do that is by saying git pull origin master, and then we're going to say dash dash allow dash unrelated dash histories. And now we can pull that down and it will merge them together. And then you'll get this. If you're doing this in terminal, go ahead and just press escape, then colon, then X, and return. All right, so now you can see here that we say 2 files changed, 70 insertions, and so it created the .gitignore and the README files for us in our local project. All right, so now that our local and remote are kind of on the same page as far as what was already on the remote, the gitignore and README, now we can push it up. So I'm going to say git push origin master, enter our password, and that should be good. If I refresh here in our repo, there we go. Now you can see all of the Xcode projects and files. All right, one thing that I want to do before we go any further is I'm going to go ahead and open up our project. And you can see here now that we have the .gitignore here. I'm going to open it with a text edit. And if I bump up the text here, you can see the things that we are going to be ignoring. Things like .ipa files and some other things that you don't really need to worry about uploading to GitHub, like the .build files. Here we have CocoaPods, and it says here that we recommend against adding the pods directory to your .gitignore, all right? So they're saying that you should keep all of your CocoaPod files in your GitHub, but you should judge for yourself, and it has a link to an article that lists the pros and cons. I am going to include the pods in the gitignore, meaning that I don't want the files from the CocoaPods being uploaded to this GitHub. It just gets a little bit messy. When you have a bunch of CocoaPods, you have hundreds, thousands of files, and when you're doing things like pull request reviews, it gets really nasty. All right, so I am adding the pods to our gitignore, meaning that we are not going to be uploading CocoaPod files to our GitHub repository. So I'm going to save that. And I'm going to, if you come back here and say git status, now we can see that we made a change to the gitignore file. And I'm going to go ahead and just push that up real quick. So I'm going to say git add dot git commit dash m added pods to gitignore. And then I'm going to say git push origin master. All right, so now that is up to date. The final thing that I'm going to do in preparation for the next few lessons is to create a new branch for us to work on. So I'm going to say git checkout -b, and I'm going to call this part 1. Okay, so not every single lesson is going to have a commit, is not going to have a branch specific to that lesson. Some lessons won't have coding, some will just be explanatory. Other times there won't be enough to merit a new branch. So we're just going to be numbering this in parts, all right? So the next few lessons will be part of this branch, part 1. And I'm going to save that, and we're going to be working on this branch for a little bit. And I'll see you in the next one when we actually start working on our UI for this app, all right? I'll see you then.